recognizing a bunch of names, so welcome. And if you haven't already met him, this is Indy. He is my teaching assistant. So tonight, yes, thank you, Indy. Tonight we're going to be talking about seed beads. I am starting a series for the next several Mondays actually, and it will be continuing into October with some more classes. And it's going to focus, the series is going to focus on various seed bead stitches. So tonight we're going to learn about seed beads in general, as well as all the things that go along with it. So the needles, what's the difference between a beading needle and a sewing needle, for example? Threads. What's the difference between beading threads and sewing threads, and does it really matter? And you know, as well as some of the odds and ends that might help you as you're doing some seed beading. So has anyone, I'm just going to switch to a gallery view here. Can you let me know if you have done any seed beading before?
I did.
I have 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I've done a little bit.
4. Okay, so we have a few. That's good. Okay, so seed beading. Well, seed beading is where you're using a lot of the little teeny tiny beads. I'm going to switch to my other camera here. And, oops, it might help if I turn it on. There we go. So these are little teeny tiny beads, and they're put together using needle and thread techniques. Okay, and oh dear, I've got some spilled beads, which is typical if you have seed beads. Seed beads spill. And there is a saying, never put out more than you can afford to lose. So, I think my other camera's up and running now. Yes, it is. Okay, so this is my tabletop here, and I will zoom in and out. These little guys are seed beads. These particular ones are size 11s. And let me zoom in on that just so you can see. And just so that you have a, there's my finger. So you can see the sort of the size. And this is actually what most people use for seed beading. Seed beads do come in various sizes. So, as I say, those are size 11s. The biggest that most people use are what's called size 8. And the bigger the number, the smaller the bead. So a size 6 is that. Okay. The next size down that most people use is what's a size 8. Again, a size 11, which is the next size down to that. We also have size 15s. Where did my size 15s go? Miyuki, here we are. So these 4 sizes is what is typically found in North American stores. Okay. So again, size 6, and there's my finger, that just so you have a reference point, size 8, size 11, size 15. They used to make them much smaller, believe it or not, than a 15. I'm going to move these over because these are size 13. So they fall actually in between these two. So that's 13. These they still make, but not commonly. So these are smaller, these are 16. Vintage beads, so we've got 3 packages here. I want to be careful with these because they're really, really teeny tiny. Oops. These are getting to the size of caraway seeds. This is a size 22. They do not make these anymore. I'm not even sure what size needle you could get through them. And if that's not small enough, there's some 24s. And last but definitely not least, these are size 26. I have no idea what kind of a needle would get through a size 26 bead. But
Excuse me,
yes.
would the last 3 just be used for sewing?
The last 3 may be used for things like, I'm not even sure sewing that you would use it. If you can find these, their chances are used for things like bead embroidery or bead embellishment on clothing. So, but all of these would be typically used with needle and thread. Not necessarily, as I say, in jewelry.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good question. So when you see various bead sizes, and there's still more out there. I haven't brought 12s, I haven't brought 10s or anything like that. But when you hear the word seed beads, this is what most people are thinking of. The other word you may hear them called are rocailles. And it's a French word. And the only thing rocaille means is seed bead. It is not a separate kind of seed bead, it's simply a seed bead. So most patterns though, call for either 8s, 11s, or 15s. 15s over here. Sometimes they call for size 13s, not too often. 16s, very seldom. It may get into some First Nations beading as embellishment. That's the 22, that's these ones. I'm just gonna put these away just so, because if they spill, you'll watch me cry. So some of these, as I say, they may be embellishment, but as I say, they don't make these anymore. So this is this one. So it gives you an idea. There's a lot of beads in this.
Where did you get yours from?
Actually, I found somebody who have a stash, and she was selling them. And it was basically just so people could have a sample of what some of the beads were. And that's precisely why I bought them, so that I could see some of the sizes. I mean, literally, these are not any bigger than a caraway seeds. So typically, these would be the sizes that you would be getting into. To go with your, I'm just going to put these away as well, the 13s. So the 3 that's left are what is most common. And when you do, when you see patterns in that, these sizes are what is normally called for. Now, they are all put together using needle and thread. So let me just zoom out a little bit. Actually, let me talk a little bit more about beads. Manufacturing now of beads takes place in one of 2 places. I mean, beads are made in many places, but the Czech Republic are exceptionally well known for their beads. They have been doing beads for many, many, many years. And most people who do indigenous regalia do use Czech beads the check beads tend to be a little less consistent in their sizing. So these are some size 8 check beads. And these ones are pretty good. But if you get into some packages, you can actually see where some are thicker and thinner than others. And actually, let me just pull out a needle here so you can see a little bit better. 2 of them here. Okay. Let me zoom in on this. There's 2 beads out of the same package. Both of them are size 8. One is a little fatter, one's a little thinner. One's a little more square, one's a little more rounded. That's the variations that you can get in check beads. You will see them labeled in stores either from the Czech Republic or as CZ or CZ, depending on how you say Z. So, however, the check beads work well for things like bead embroidery because you can actually go through and select beads that will fit better in a space. So in that way, the check beads are very good for that. The holes tend to be smaller. However, you can still get several passes through. So as you can see, there's a bunch more. There is some variation in that you can see. So the other country that does a lot of them is Japan. And Japan has been doing them, for the last 20, 25, 30 years. The 2 brands that people know about are Toho and Miyuki. And it's like Coke and Pepsi. Both are essentially the same thing. People have preferences. The Miyuki beads tend to be a little bit more round, whereas the Toho beads tend to be a little bit more square. Let me see if I can demonstrate. It's not as noticeable in the size 11s, but it is quite noticeable in the 8s. Let me just put some of these away. Okay, here's a Miyuki 8 and my Toho 8s. Okay, yeah, I think you'll be able to see it with these. Okay, so these white ones are Toho 8s. These blue ones are Miyuki. Just take out some of these. Okay, so the white are Toho, the blue are Miyuki. You can see a little bit of difference. The white ones are just a little thicker, a little wider, and a little more square. The blue ones, the Miyuki brand, are not quite as wide, but they're a little more rounded on the shoulders. So both are interchangeable. Some patterns, the designers are specifying whether they prefer that you use Tohos or Miyukis. If they don't specify it, it doesn't matter. The reason they specify it is because when there's just this much of a fraction between beads, as you use beads, that small amount of fraction is going to get more and more noticeable depending on what you're doing. So that's a little bit about the shaping of beads. However, Japanese beads are much more consistent. So when you see when you look at all the Japanese beads, for example, in one tube, chances are they're going to be much more uniform to each other than what the Czech ones will be. Same as the Miyukis. The Japanese beads tend to have a bigger hole, so they are really used a lot for knitting, so you can get the fiber and that through it. Okay, the other shape of bead are cylinder beads, and let me just demonstrate something here. Cylinders, if you remember back to your geometry classes way back when, bring this down, zoom out a little bit. Okay, so your regular seed bead has a round hole. The shoulders are round. And that's what most seed beads look like. A cylinder bead also has the round hole, roughly the same width in the hole as your seed beads. But unlike the roundness, a cylinder is just like what the name says. It comes down and has straight sides. The hole of a cylinder bead is quite big compared to the overall size of the bead. In a seed bead, you've got all this sticky outy bit like that, whereas the seed bead, the hole is much thinner, or the walls are much thinner, and so therefore it just has more space to go in. It also allows a few more passes of size, or of your thread to go through. This does also come in different sizes. So let me go back and pull those out. And those are called cylinder beads. And again, if they're by Miyuki, they are called delicas. If they are by Toho, the brand name that they use are Toho Treasures, as well as Aiko, A-I-K-O. Now, I do have another. Where did they go? Okay, I did have 11s here, but that's okay. But these are all cylinder beads. Let me pull some of these out. And let me pull out a... I'm just going to pull out a regular seed bead just so you can see sort of the shape difference. Oh, there's the other delicate. Okay, got the needle here again. Okay.
How do you store your beads, Pam?
Oh, I keep them, generally speaking, in the original containers they're in. And I separate them all by color. My beads are outgrowing their storage. And of course, I would never think of stop buying. But, okay, let me just pick up a couple of these so you can see some of the size difference. Okay, just going to refocus this. There we go. Okay, so here we have a round seed bead. That's a general one from, that's a Miyuki. Here's the same size cylinder bead. And you can see that the sides are not round. That is a size 11. If we go up one size to a 10, remember, the smaller the number, the bigger the bead. So 11, 10, 8. Big jump in between a 10 and an 8. Or if you want to go down the other way, a 15. That's as small as the delicas get. So these are cylinders. They are round holes, and there's what it looks like on the side. So it almost looks, if you have young family people who use those perler beads, they iron, the kinds you put in and you iron them into a shape. It's the same shape as those. So that is typically a little bit about seed beads.
Are bugle beads and cylinder beads the same?
No.
No.
No, no. Bugle beads are a very long bead. They're cylinder in shape, but they're technically not what's called a cylinder bead. They're strictly bugle beads. Bugle beads do come in various lengths, and you know, depending on what you want to do with them. One thing about bugle beads is that they have extremely sharp edges. Okay, so what can some of these do? Some of the projects that are going to be coming up next week, for example, I've got these earrings coming up. These are going to be done using peyote stitch and cylinder beads. Now you can use them, you can do them with seed beads, but they will give you a different shape. These are just, this is a little bit of peyote. Let's see if we can, that's, okay, and you can see how the beads actually fit together to form fabric. There's really no space between the beads. They fit together like bricks. They're amazing. And they actually make a fabric of beads. And they're small enough that you can design with them. The beads are small enough. Something else you can do, another week we're going to be doing something called a brick stitch heart. And the original pattern calls for the cylinder beads. This is using the 8s, but again, you can use the regular size 8 seed beads. That's what the difference will do. You can also use a size 6 seed bead, and that will be proportionally bigger. So if you change your beads, you're going to change the look. However, when we're doing something this straightforward, it's not an issue. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to learn right angle weave using size 8s. I like to use size 8s, because it's a little easier. Right angle weave creates this sort of mesh of beads, but what's nice is that you can embellish it as well. So we're going to create what I call a dog tag pendant that you'll be able to embellish with your choice of either fire polish beads or what we call drucks, which are the same size bead but perfectly round. If you want to do crystals, you can do crystals. You can do anything you want. But so these are the 3 projects we'll be using. So we'll have an opportunity to do the various stitches using various beads. Any questions so far about beads or anything like that? You're all so quiet. I don't mind the questions, really. Okay, let's go on and let's talk about thread. Okay, let me just move some things off my board here. Now, sewing thread and beading thread are 2 very different animals. If you do any sewing, you'll know that sewing thread is usually cotton or polyester or a cotton polyester blend. And most of that is being used for finishing. You might use some heavier gauge thread for the body. I'm not a seamstress, but beading thread is somewhat like that as well, except it is made out of nylon. So nylon thread is strong, very strong. And there are various brands, just like there are brands out there of sewing thread. There's some good brands and some not so good brands. So these are 3 that I generally work with, or 4 that I work with a lot. These all happen to be Japanese threads. If I was to pull out and sort of undo some of these threads, let me see if I can do this one a little bit. I'm just going to try and shred it. Beading thread is made, as I say, out of nylon. There, it is not a spun thread like sewing thread is. Sewing thread, you can see how it plies around and you can see how it's spun. Beading thread is actually parallel fibers and that run the length of the, okay, this I've shredded a little bit. Normally you do not want to shred your thread. However, this, you'll be able to see what it looks like. Okay, let me zoom in so you can see a little bit here. Okay, so I've shredded this a little bit. Most beading thread has a bit of a bonding to it, just to keep it from shredding. But you can see it is not spun. And if I was to pull this a little bit more, you can see how it is running basically the length of the thread. Okay, and that's what makes it very strong. Brands, Miyuki, KO, Toho has their own brand called 1G, and Hana are all good threads. However, they all have different properties. Hana actually has a good stretch. So you need to pick the thread that goes with your projects. If you are doing, say, example, weaving on a loom, and you're using the threads for a warp, you don't want it to stretch, because the minute you take it off the loom, it's going to crumple up on you. That stretch is going to snap back. I find Hana has a stretch. Miyuki has more stretch. I was surprised about that. There is a brand called Nymo, N-Y-M-O, and it's been around for eons. It comes in a bobbin like this, and it also comes in a cone. Don't waste time on the little bobbin ones because it shreds like crazy. However, it comes in various colors. Nymo thread actually was used in the upholstery trade. So I'm just going to grab something. If you'll excuse me, I'll be right back. Okay. Okay, this is a cone of Nymo thread. There's a lot of thread on this, needless to say. However, this thread does not stretch. It's got a bonding on it. I've used it for some stitches, peyote and so on. It's not bad. I love to use it for if I'm doing loom work because it does not stretch. It is strong. Nymo actually was used in the upholstery trade. And if when you have a sewing machine, you've got the cones that are on top. They are the top threads. And then you have the bottom threads, which are the bobbins. And the bobbins generally don't have the same strength or bonding as the top, as the top cone threads. So it is a good color. The cones come in either black or white. It's made by Coates. It used to be called Coates and Clark. And this would last you a long time. I know that we have an instructor through Bead Effects. Her name is Naomi Smith, and she is an Indigenous artist and swears everything is done using Nymo thread.
What about silk threads, Pamela?
I'm sorry?
Silk threads.
Silk isn't used generally in beading.
Oh.
There is the friction caused by beads. And even though silk is strong, it's not used in this manner. It is used in things like pearl knotting.
Okay.
Yeah. And silk thread or cord is available for purl knotting or any kind of knotting in various sizes. So, but it is out there too. Okay, so that's a little bit about thread. There are ways to keep your threads from shredding. So you can use beeswax. There's a couple of products out there to help to apply to thread so that it makes it a little bit slipperier and helps reduce some of the friction. The best thing is not to pull too great a length. I generally don't do much more than a wingspan. I know a number of people who will pull 2 or 3 wingspans of thread, and besides getting it completely tangled up everywhere and catching it, you're actually spending more time pulling thread through than you are actually beading. So generally I do pull no more than a wingspan, and a wingspan is my arms outstretched, fingertip to fingertip. The shorter your thread, yes, the more times you have to add thread, and therefore you have to weave in the ends. But in the long run, your thread is not going to shred as much because you're not pulling it through the beads as often. Okay?
Pam, I have a question. It's Lee.
Yes.
How do you decide what color thread you should go with?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, yes. The infernal color question. There's no easy answer to that. Part of it is in some of your projects, you may see the thread. In fact, in some of the stitches, you see more thread than you want to. In that case, you can use your thread as an element of design. So if you wanted to do a contrasting thread, why not? It's not something most people think of. However, if you want something to blend, then pick a color that is the closest to the majority of your colors. So for example, if you had purple beads, is the majority of the purple blending in better with the light or the dark? The other thing is if you use a neutral color, black and white are not neutral. Okay, one is dark, one is light. However, there are shades of, this is sort of a peach almost, but there's colors called sand, which I guess I've used up. You could try gray. Gray blends into almost any color. Here's one. Okay, this is what's called sand. And it's a shade of brown that sort of a gray brown, and it tends to blend. If you're doing something with a lot of gold, then something like this color will actually almost disappear. If you're doing something with a lot of silver, gray will almost disappear. And it's available light or dark gray. Some of these you can see I still have quite a bit of the green because it didn't seem to blend with anything. Colors that I do use a lot of, more of the sort of the medium colors as opposed to the extremes. Now, if you're doing things like bead embroidery, where if you don't necessarily see, you may not be covering everything, then pick a color that goes with your background fabric. Otherwise, you'll see all these threads sticking in and out. Now, things like indigenous regalia are very different. Usually they are covered, the style of beading covers the content or covers the surface, and you don't see any thread. It's just the style of how it's beaded. You just don't see the thread at all.
Pamela?
Yes.
When you're finishing off or starting or
Yes.
weaving in,
Yep.
I'm thinking, when you're weaving it in, can you actually destroy the thread by splitting it if there's too much?
You won't destroy the thread by splitting it. What'll happen is that if you ever want to undo it, you're going to run into problems that way. The more you manipulate thread and undo it, it does wear the thread. So
But if you're just weaving it in, you're not planning on undoing it.
no, you won't damage it by weaving it in
Okay.
at all. No.
Okay, because I'm squeezing it in through.
It shouldn't matter.
Okay.
What you want to do is try not to break the beads as you're weaving it in.
Yes. No, the beads are good so far.
Yeah. I've broken my share of beads. Any questions about
Yes.
threads?
I have one, Pam. It's
Yes.
Vera. You
Yes,
said
Vera.
the Mayuki and the Hannah thread were stretchy, but are the other two stretchy as well?
The 1G is not as stretchy. It has a little bit of stretch. KO has a little bit of stretch as well. I find this one has the least amount of stretch, the Nymo. And so depending on what you're doing, whether you want stretch or not.
Why would you want stretch?
Well, if I'm doing a something that is geometric, and I'm just quickly looking for something that I'm working on that is geometric, then as you pull it and do it, it may require the thread to sort of go around things. So for example, I'm working on this. This will be the bottom or the top. That's what it'll be. It'll be an ornament. This is seed beading. This is tubular peyote, and it is being done using delica beads. So these are the cylinder beads, and it's got some Swarovskis. But the thread I'm using does allow for a bit of stretch so that there is a little bit of give. Okay, so if there was no give in here, as the beads snap into place, I run the risk of breaking beads.
So you're making this, and the beads are holding the shape, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Wow.
This is just construction, and it's just one bead resting on another. Yeah.
So is there a pattern, or are you just doing it like winging it as you go along?
No, oh no, I'm not that good. This is a pattern, and somebody gave me the pattern. I don't even have the woman's name. If you look up Christmas ornaments, there's tons out there, tons of stuff out there. This was one of the products I was talking about that you can run your threads through. This is called Thread Magic, and it's like a beeswax, except it's more synthetic. And you literally just run it through, and this deposits a little bit of this silicone stuff that just helps your beads, helps it go through the beads a little bit better without shredding. So I'm using, do I have my thread in here? I'm using Hannah or Mayuki on this. I'm not sure which. So yeah, but this is typical some of the stuff that I do. Okay. Any other questions about threads?
I have to say, Pam, that ornament is amazing.
Thank you.
Stunning.
I have got, thank you. I love doing things that are geometric. As you can see, I have more beads and more stuff. The plan is to do some for Christmas. The problem is my family doesn't like them. So,
No.
Yeah, I'm serious. So they're not getting one. But this is the kind of stuff I love to do. So if you've got me at anything geometric. So thank you very much. That was your very kind comments. Okay, so let me just put these away and set them aside. I want to talk a little bit about needles. Dreaded needles. And I think this is where a lot of people get confused. Beading needles and sewing needles are, again, totally different.
Yes.
Sewing needles tend to be a little bit stiffer
Very.
because you want a little bit more control as you're doing running stitches or any kind of hand sewing. Beading needles, on the other hand, tend to be much more flexible. So this one I've been using for a while. This is roughly a size 10. The higher the number of the needle, the thinner it is. So a size 16 needle, let me find a 16 here, is going to be physically thinner, a little hard to tell, than, I might be able to see that. Let's see.
How do you find the needles if you drop them on the floor?
A magnet,
Okay.
find a magnet, that will help. Flashing the light from your cell phone, if you put it on an angle, will help to catch the light on it.
Okay.
That's the easiest way, short of walking over it with bare feet.
Yes.
Yes, been there, done that. So these are two different sizes of needles. This one on the right is thicker. This one on the left is thinner, a size 16 versus a size, I think it's a 10 or 11. The difference is the higher the number, the smaller the bead, the smaller the needle. So a size 16 needle should fit a size 16 bead. Let's see. And it does not quite do it. It doesn't go over the eye. The beads are not, these are a check bead, and sometimes they just don't fit. However, indeed. So when you get into these teeny tiny itty bitty beads, you really have to buy your needles with care. As I say, I don't use a lot of these except for major embellishment. Most of my beading is with 10s, 11s, and 8s. So, you know, a size 10 works very well. Beads come in different brands. Some beads, or some needles rather, can be as much as $1 or so each. And to be honest, you do get what you pay for. I tend, as you can see, this one's bent. I tend to turn my needles into roller coasters really quick. The pony beads, I turn them the fastest. Tulip beads, on the other hand, they are out of Japan. They are an excellent, excellent needle. Another one that is an excellent needle is Toho.
Pamela, would you be wanting a shorter needle or a longer needle?
I prefer a longer needle. That's where it gets to be a very personal choice. I just tend to hold the longer needles better, and I find I run out of needle if I use something very short, and I just find it very awkward. Some needles have golden eyes on it, and that's supposed to make it a little bit easier. There is no consistency in the size of eyes in needles. So Toho needles are very good, and they have a pretty good eye. Let me just get this over there. I think you can see the eye. I've got it against the white there. The Toho needles have a good eye. So do the tulip needles. Let me just, this is a brand new package. This is actually a bead embroidery needle. I haven't tried it. The owner of Bead Effects tossed me this because she knows I do a lot of bead embroidery. They come in a very fancy little container here. And unfortunately, they are a sharp, so which makes them very short. Let's see if I can put it against a white surface here. And you
That
can
looks
see,
more of a sewing needle.
it does look like a sewing needle, but it is listed as a bead embroidery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's got a good size eye. The
Well,
Toho tulips
Wouldn't
both
that,
work.
the eye be too big to go through the bead once you
It
put your
depends
thread
on the
through?
bead. It depends on the bead. So this would be a size 11. It would be matching up ideally with a size 11 bead. And, well, that's a size 11 there. That's a size 11.
Pamela, how would you spell Toho?
T-O-H-O.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So it goes through as the size of Delica, fine, the size 11. And it goes through the size 11 seed bead.
How about 15? Can you try 15, please?
To go through those two beads?
No, no,
The,
no,
oh,
no.
you mean to try
needle.
a size 15
15
bead?
seed bead.
Size
15 or seed bead.
Yeah. Don't forget, it's not just the eye of the needle. You'll have thread on it too.
Thread, exactly, that's doubled
So
over.
it's, yeah, and the thread, as you say, is doubled over. Let me find my Toho 15s.
And then if you're going through
Yep,
twice,
yep,
then that's 4 times with the doubled over thread.
yep. And it gets to be really easy to break beads. Trust me, you don't want to break beads. And it's always the last possible stitch you need to do is when you break a bead. Okay, so these are both size 15. And they do go through. I felt one of them catch a little bit. So, but each manufacturer of needles are going to be a little bit different as well. So this is where it becomes very personal. When you find something, stock up. When you find that the needle gets bent and you find yourself, trying to fix it more than you are sewing with it, then it's time to pull out a brand new needle.
Oh, but Pamela, sometimes a bent needle is a blessing in disguise.
It is. I have purposely bent needles.
Yes.
These are a size 13. These are a hard needle. They're way too short, but there's been times, and I've intentionally bent the needle. Well, there's one I've even bent more to try and get it around a corner because the beads, just the way they're lining up. And, these are so short, I actually use a small pair of pliers to try and manipulate them. But these are a size 13. They're called a hard needle, so they don't bend as much. The eye on this is not bad. Let's put it against some white. Let's see. Not too bad there. So yeah, when it comes to needles, it's something that you just simply have to keep experimenting. Okay, so that's a little bit about needles. We've talked about beads and we've talked about thread. A couple other things I want to talk about. One is a beading surface. Okay, so what do you need to bead on? Well, it does not have to be fancy. I have what's called a bead on it board. Because I do a lot of seed beading, I have chosen to invest in it. They're not cheap. Most people start out with this kind of Velux bead mat. It is actually a kind of sponge. It is easy to keep clean. Just rinse it out, squish it out, and let it dry. All these marks, it was folded up. All the marks do eventually work themselves out. One of the things is that they do tend to creep a little bit as you work on it. You'll find you might be chasing your bead mat around a little bit. You don't have to invest a lot in a bead mat. You really don't. You can use a t-shirt you know, just lay a t-shirt flat. You want something where the beads are not going to roll around a lot. A bead on a board does have the bumpers, which keeps it from falling off, but you don't have to go this far. You really don't. You could use a placemat. You could use a linen tea towel. I wouldn't suggest terry towel because of all the loops. Your beads and your needles are just going to get caught in it. The fire line is a braided fishing line put out initially by Berkeley. Berkeley is, if you do any fishing, they are a well-known place. The Beadsmith, which is a manufacturer distributor, have been repackaging fire line, and a lot of people use this instead of thread. I do use a lot of it. It comes in different poundages. This is 6, which is pretty all-purpose. However, I don't use it on everything. I don't use it on like peyote because it's overkill. I don't need that much here. I do use it all the time for things like spiral rope because there is no stretch in this. It is slippery, so it does not knot well. But I mean, a lot of people do use it. It's available in what they call crystal, which is sort of this white, and it's available in smoke, which is, it's got this graphite on it. There's brands out there that, you know, they're competing with this called Wildfire instead of Fireline. It's very similar to this. It's just like Coke and Pepsi. So that's a little bit about Fireline. It's out there, not terribly cheap. This was $12 and change for 50 yards. However, if you're near a fishing shop, Big Bass Pro or any of the other stuff, you can get it there in much bigger spools. So 6 pound is a good all-purpose. 8 pound is good all-purpose as well. When you get up into 10 pound, it's a little overkill. It comes in 4 pound, which I find a little difficult to use, but it's also available in 2 pound. And I have a brand new spool.
What's it made of?
It is a microfused braided bead thread. So it's a synthetic.
But if you go to, whatchamacallit, to Bass Pro.
Big Bass Pro, yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to be thread there, is it?
It's the same thing.
Oh, get out.
No, it's the same thing. Yeah.
So it's actually a thread that they're using.
It's not thread. It's a braided bead. It's called thread here because Beadsmith has repurposed it and relabeled it. But it's actually a fishing line.
But what's it made from?
Some kind of a synthetic material, like a nylon or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay, so
nylon.
it's not a wire.
It's a nylon. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is what your beading thread's made out of anyways.
Yes.
Fireline is really tough on scissors. So use a separate pair for Fireline, because they'll dull down really quickly. Save a pair of scissors for regular thread or beading thread, and another one for Fireline. Some people swear by children's scissors that they cut really well. The other thing you can get are thread zappers that melt the threads. It applies a little bit of heat. So that's a Fireline. Other things that work really well. Okay, so talked about thread. Something to scoop up your beads. Okay, you can buy a scoop like this. This is put out by Beadsmith. Some people use baby spoons. Some people use shell, like an open and wide shell. This was one of those fancy teaspoons that I put in a vise and squished it, which makes it great because now it fits into a tube like that. So don't be afraid to do some modifications to your tools. you want something, there's going to be times when it's really hard to pull a thread through your needle or something. In sewing, you can grab what they use as needle grabbers. It's usually sometimes a piece of leather or something that you can grasp onto the needle a little bit better. You can use small little pairs of pliers. This was swag in one of the places I went to. It is so handy. And it's literally just a miniature pair of pliers. So if you keep a small pair, nothing fancy, just something you can grab the needle with and pull through on those times when it gets really tight.
You know, Pamela, my
Buy
mother,
this in Dollarama.
You can get them at Dollarama? Yeah,
Yeah. It comes $4 for 3-piece.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Things like that
Pamela,
work fine. Yes.
my mother sewed a lot, and she always had a pair of pliers.
Yep.
I always laughed at her.
Oh,
Well,
they're wonderful.
in my sewing kit and beading kit,
Yep.
I now have a pair of pliers.
They are, I've got there's a fellow at work who does a lot of tech stuff and, you know, a lot of tools. And he saw this and he says, "What is that?" And he laughed. And it's like, well, it's actually amazingly
Yeah.
useful. The
Yeah.
other thing you want to do is to have something to put all these little essentials in. And there's all kinds of stuff you can get at the dollar store. There's all kinds of stuff that you can get. This I found, of all places, at Michael's. And what it is a container to hold the gift cards. They're usually up at the front where the salespeople are. And they'll say congratulations or whatever. And it's what they put gift cards into so you can present it. I've never seen this on anything else, but it's true. But inside, it's fairly deep, but it's deep enough. I have a little bit of glue, a good pair of scissors. I have this container, which I use for broken needles. That's one thing I do want to say is don't throw away your broken needles in the garbage, because it is a danger for anyone who's collecting garbage or doing stuff like that. So put your broken needles into something, but it fits my little pair of pliers. I have attached a couple of strips of magnetic tape so I can hold my needles at the top there. What else does this have? Oh, it puts my little spoon in there.
What's the little yellow thing?
This is just a
Tack.
regular tack, but
Yes.
what it's good for is to break a bead.
Oh, okay.
So if you are doing something and you have a bead in the wrong place, then you can pop it into something that you're doing. I won't really break a bead here, but you can just pop it into something and break a bead that way. Okay?
I use the plier.
You can use pliers. If you're going to put, let's see. If you're going to break a bead using pliers, put a needle through it first, okay? And then take your pliers and break it. The reason you put your needle through first is so you don't break the thread. And then there's still no guarantee, but you take the less chance of the glass bead breaking or cutting the thread.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So generally speaking, everything is, all of your beads, whether it comes from the Czech Republic or Japan, are glass. They all have different finishes done. So whether it's galvanized, like the shiny part here, or something that's more alabaster, it starts off as a rod of glass. So just be aware that when you do break beads and have all those minute dust little bits, it is glass.
What's the difference between the silver lined, Pam?
The silver lined is, this is silver lined. What silver lined means is that you, within the hollow piece of glass, you actually have silver, metallic silver in there. Over time, it may tarnish. What you don't want to do is get it wet, at least very often, because that silver will eventually wear out. Okay, as I say, it tarnishes.
Oh.
So, yeah. Any other questions? These are really great questions, guys.
If we want to get beads, I know I have seed beads, but I don't have cylinder beads. What colors, sizes, that kind of thing for your upcoming classes?
The cylinder beads for the next week's project are size 11 cylinder beads. It calls for 2 colors. It can be any 2 colors that you want. I tend to design in black and silver or black and white, but don't limit that to pick out something that you like. For something like this, though, you do want a fair bit of contrast. It'll make your life easier trying to determine where, you know, the colors.
What size you want?
Size 11. So
Size.
what you're looking for is something like this. So it says you have the color number there and the size. This is all bought at Bead Effects, and there it tells you the size, Delica size 11. So this particular one, this is the same purple as the other. It's called Dyed Silver Line Lilac Alabaster. Again, it's size 11, and the color number is that. What's really neat is that things like Miyuki carry the same number through a lot of their beads. So for example, in cylinder beads, black is color 10. It's going to be the same color 10, whether it's in size 8, 10, 11, or 15. So it works really well trying to track your colors that way. So, any questions about anything we've talked tonight about?
One quick one, Pam, sorry.
Yes. No,
I
go
know
ahead.
all the beads say like 11/0, 8/0. What
Yep.
does a 0 mean?
It's just the way that the industry sizes. So it's usually the 0 is called aught, A-U-G-H. And so it's like size 11 aught. It's just something that the industry has done. So for example,
Actually, the word "ought" is Old English.
do you know what the original meaning was?
The original meaning is none.
Is
0.
none.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is
So-
Old English.
Thank you. There's a little bit about sizing on your handouts. If you do knitting or crocheting, you can also use beads as well. If you're going to use something bigger, you're going to get into the size 6s because of the bigger hole and for it to accommodate your yarn or whatever fiber it is you're using. And of course, beads get bigger than that as well. Is where you get into some of the larger pony beads, such as size 4 or size 2. And fiber is a different animal than sort of the seed beading for Gesundheit, seed beading for jewelry making. But that gets into a little bit here as well. A little bit about cylinder beads, a little bit about colors and finishes. There's also a whole lot of what's called 2-hole beads, and it's just part of the market. I think they're becoming a little less popular now. And a little bit more about thread. So next steps. Well, if you're looking for ideas, there's tons of stuff on websites. I'm just going to flip back so you can see me a little bit. Tons of stuff on websites. There's, what do you call it? There's websites couple of the beading magazines are actually gone out. Bead and Button has gone out. It's going out of business, unfortunately. But there's a lot of things out there. Check out what's there in Pinterest. There's a lot of designers out there. Some of the designers to look at is Jill Wiseman. And Jill Wiseman Designs, Wiseman. She does videos. She does some amazing stuff. If you like geometric stuff, like I was doing there for the ornaments, Jean Power, Jean Power, Power, and she's out of England. She is an amazing person. And because of COVID, a lot of people are taking, well, pretty well have to take to doing virtual classes now. So I
Sorry,
know.
what did you say that late Power? What was
Power.
the first name?
Jean, Jean.
Oh, thank you.
You're quite welcome. And she does a lot of boxes. She does a lot of things like that. Trying to
What's
think
her
of
last
some-
name, Pam?
Power, Power. Okay. Any other questions? You've asked some great questions.
Thank
So
you
how-
so much. This was awesome.
The other thing that you really want to consider is good lighting. Okay, you can't see anything very well without a light. So you don't have to get a fancy light, but get enough light that you can see by. And magnification, whether if it's just reading glasses or if you want something a little stronger, there are like what Barry's wearing. There
I
are.
went to the dollar store and bought extra, like the number bigger than I need.
Yes.
And it's,
Yeah, no, actually, reader
But-
glasses are really quite inexpensive right now,
Yes, they
and
are.
everywhere sells them.
Yeah.
So if you need something like, normally if I need something first thing in the morning or late in the evening, then I will would be 1.5. But if I wanted to really magnify it, I'd go for a 3.5 or maybe even a 4.
Yeah, Costco sells them through to a package and they're only $19.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's something that you'll just use for this, but there's nothing more frustrating as if you can't see it well.
Yes. Can I show you what I did with the same, this is,
Oh, here, let me spotlight you. I think I can spotlight you.
yeah, this is.
No, I
with-
can't.